Right now, there's a woman staring at her phone. 10 men are texting her. 20 more are waiting. 100 have tried. And none of them matter. Because they're all making the same fatal mistake. They're competing. And the moment you compete, you've already lost. If you've ever felt invisible next to men who had more money, better looks, or smoother words, hit that like button right now. Subscribe, because what I'm about to show you will flip everything you thought you knew about attraction. By the end of this, you'll understand why the man who refuses to play always wins. Here's what Machiavelli understood that most men never will. Power doesn't come from being the best option. It comes from being the only option she can't stop thinking about. While everyone else is fighting for her attention, you're about to learn how to make her fight for yours. Most men believe seduction is addition. Add more effort, add more gifts, add more compliments, add more time, and they wonder why she loses interest. But Machiavelli knew the truth 500 years ago. Value isn't created through abundance. It's created through scarcity. Every man in her phone is doing the exact same thing. Good morning texts, funny memes, dinner invitations, constant availability. And she's bored. Not because they're bad men, but because they're predictable men. And predictability is the death of desire. Think about it. When something is always available, always free, always there, how much do you value it? Not much. But when something is rare, limited, hard to obtain, your brain assigns it massive value. That's not manipulation. That's psychology. And here's where it gets interesting. While those 9 men are flooding her with attention, trying desperately to stand out, they're actually doing the opposite. They're blending together into one forgettable mass. The guy who texts every morning. The guy who sends memes. The guy who offers dinner. Different faces, same energy. Desperate, available, predictable. And she feels it before she thinks it. The neediness, the anxiety, the unspoken message behind every text. Please choose me. I need you to validate me. I'm waiting for your approval. That's not attraction. That's repulsion. Drop this in the comments. I choose scarcity over effort. Now here's what they'll never tell you. Women don't fall for the man who tries the hardest. They fall for the man who makes them feel something they can't explain. And that feeling isn't created by what you do. It's created by what you refuse to do. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't explain. You don't wait by your phone. Because you understand something most men never learn. Distance creates desire. Silence speaks louder than words. Mystery pulls stronger than clarity. While they're trying to win her over with effort, you're creating something far more powerful. Uncertainty. And uncertainty is the oxygen of attraction. She's used to men who respond instantly, who rearrange their schedule for her, who drop everything when she shows interest, who treat her time like it's more valuable than their own. And what does that communicate? That you have nothing better to do. That your life revolves around her. That you need her more than she needs you. But when you don't respond instantly, when you have plans that don't bend for her, when your time actually costs something, when your attention isn't freely given, she notices. Not consciously, instinctively, because suddenly you're different from every other man. You're not performing. You're not trying. You're not desperate. You're just existing with a quiet confidence that says my life was complete before you, and it'll be complete after you. That energy, that self-contained power, is magnetic. Here's what happens in her mind when she meets a man like that. She starts wondering, why doesn't he chase me like the others? Why doesn't he need my validation? Why doesn't he react when I pull away? What makes him so calm? And that wondering becomes curiosity. Curiosity becomes focus. Focus becomes obsession. Not because you played games, but because you simply refused to play. While the others are performers auditioning for her approval, you're the director who doesn't need the part. Machiavelli said it perfectly. The man who controls perception controls everything. And right now, every man in her life is perceived the same way. Available, eager, replaceable. But you're the anomaly. The man who doesn't fit her script. The one she can't quite figure out. And women, more than anything, are drawn to what they cannot immediately understand. Not because they're shallow, but because mystery creates psychological tension. And tension is what keeps thoughts circling back to you even when you're not there. Drop this in the comments. I am the mystery. Now let's go deeper into why this works at a biological level. Because this isn't just philosophy. This is neuroscience. When a woman feels attraction, her brain doesn't light up in the visual cortex like a man's does. It lights up in the emotional centers, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the regions tied to memory and feeling, which means she doesn't fall for what she sees. She falls for what she feels in your presence. And what creates the strongest feelings? Emotional intensity combined with unpredictability. When you're always there, always available, always responding, her brain stops producing dopamine, the chemical of desire, the chemical of anticipation, the chemical that makes her think about you when you're gone. But when you combine moments of connection with periods of absence, something changes. Her brain starts craving the next hit, the next conversation, the next time she'll see you. And that craving, that emotional anticipation, is far more addictive than any gift, compliment, or constant attention could ever be. This is why the nice guy loses. Not because he's kind, but because he's flat. No emotional peaks, no valleys, no tension, just predictable safety. And safety without tension creates comfort, not desire. She might appreciate him, but she won't chase him. Now here's where most men completely misunderstand what I'm saying. They think this means be cold, be distant, be an asshole. Wrong. That's not scarcity. That's just being unavailable for the sake of it. And women see through that immediately. Real scarcity comes from having a life so full, so purposeful, so aligned with your own goals that you're naturally selective with your time. You're not avoiding her to play games. You're living your life, and she either fits into that life or she doesn't. That's the difference. The fake player pretends to be busy while desperately waiting for her text. The high-value man actually is busy. And when he does give attention, it's genuine. It's present. It's high quality. But it's also limited. Because his time actually matters. And she feels that difference. One is performing scarcity. The other is living it. One is trying to create value. The other simply has it. One is playing hard to get. The other is hard to get. Drop this in the comments. My time has weight. Now let's talk about what happens when you master this. When you truly become the man who doesn't need her validation to feel complete, something shifts in the entire dynamic. You're no longer competing with those other 9 men. You're not even in the same category. They're options she's considering. You're the experience she can't forget. They're fighting to enter her world. You're the world she wants to enter. They're asking for permission. You're offering invitation. And that shift, that reversal of power, changes everything. Because now, when she texts you, she's hoping you respond. When she sees you, she's checking if you notice. When you're quiet, she's wondering why. The entire script has flipped. And it happened not because you chased harder, but because you stopped chasing completely. Here's the brutal truth they'll never teach you in school. Women don't remember the man who treated them the best. They remember the man who made them feel the most. And feeling isn't created through perfection. It's created through impact. One deep conversation that shakes her. One moment of vulnerability that catches her off guard. One time you saw through her mask when no one else did. One goodbye she didn't see coming. Those moments, those emotional anchors, are what keep you alive in her mind. Not the flowers, not the compliments, not the constant attention, but the moments when you touched something inside her that no one else has reached. When you made her see herself differently. When you made her feel emotions she'd forgotten existed. That's what being unforgettable means. It's not about being perfect. It's about being impossible to replicate. And you become impossible to replicate when you stop trying to be what she expects and start being what she's never experienced. Most men are trying to match her ideal. You're creating a new standard. They're answering her questions. You're making her question herself. They're giving her what she wants. You're showing her what she didn't know she needed. Drop this in the comments. I create the standard. But here's where it gets even darker, even more precise. There's a specific psychological mechanism that separates the man she thinks about from the man she forgets. It's called emotional anchoring. And once you understand it, you'll never look at attraction the same way. An emotional anchor is a moment so charged with feeling that her brain permanently links that emotion to you. It's not built through logic, it's built through sensation. And when that anchor forms, every time that emotion resurfaces in her life, she thinks of you. Even if years pass, even if she's with someone else, even if she tells herself she's moved on, that emotion is tied to you, and you can't untie it with willpower. It's neurological, it's permanent, it's the closest thing to control without actual control. And here's what most men never realize. You don't create emotional anchors by being nice. You create them by being real, by saying the thing no one else has the courage to say, by touching the truth she's been avoiding, by making her feel seen in a way that's almost uncomfortable. When you look at her and say something like, "There's something about the way you see the world that unsettles me, and I can't stop thinking about it," that's not a pickup line. That's a psychological imprint. Because now she's wondering what you saw, what you meant, why you said it. And every time she thinks about that moment, she thinks about you. That's an emotional anchor. And you didn't create it by being perfect. You created it by being present, by seeing her beyond the surface, by touching something real. Machiavelli understood this at the highest level. True power isn't about force. It's about influence. And the deepest influence happens when you're not even in the room. When your absence is louder than anyone else's presence. When she can't escape you even when you're gone. That's the ultimate victory. Not making her choose you in the moment, but making it impossible for her to forget you after. Drop this in the comments. I live in her thoughts. Now here's the part that's going to make you uncomfortable. Because what I'm about to say goes against everything you've been taught. The strongest move you can make with a woman isn't staying. It's being willing to leave. Not as a threat, not as manipulation, but as a boundary, as a standard, as a quiet declaration that says I don't stay where I'm not valued. Most men think persistence proves love, that waiting shows devotion, that staying demonstrates commitment. And they're wrong, because in the emotional battlefield, the man who can't walk away is the man who's already lost. He's not choosing to stay, he's trapped by need. But the man who can leave at any moment, who has the emotional strength to walk away with peace, with no bitterness, with no drama, that a man has all the power, because he's not staying out of desperation. He's staying by choice, and choice creates value. When she realizes you could leave, that you're not emotionally dependent on her, that you'd be fine without her, everything shifts. You're no longer just another man trying to win her. You're the one man who might not stay. And that possibility, that uncertainty, ignites something primal. She doesn't want to lose you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're rare. Because you're the only man in her life who doesn't need her to feel complete. And that self-sufficiency, that emotional independence, is the most attractive thing you could ever demonstrate. Machiavelli said it clearly. He who depends on another's will can never be free in seduction. That translates perfectly. If your emotional stability depends on her behavior, you're already controlled. But if your peace is untouchable, then you become uncontrollable. And women are drawn to what they cannot control. Now let me be brutally honest with you. Everything I've just taught you means nothing if you don't apply it. Understanding without action is just entertainment. And most men will watch this, feel inspired, and change absolutely nothing. They'll still chase, still beg, still compete. But you're different. You're part of the 10% who actually does the work. So here's what you do starting right now. When she cancels plans, don't get angry, but don't reorganize your world either. Respond calmly. Move forward with your day. Show her your life doesn't bend to whim. When she leaves your message unanswered, don't text again. Don't explain. Don't chase. Stay silent. Let your absence speak. When she grows distant, don't fill the gap with extra effort. Reflect her energy. And if what she gives is cold, you draw your line. Not out of pride, out of standards. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's practice, training. Every time you feel the urge to beg for validation and replace it with self-respect instead, your brain rewrites itself. You start feeling strength where they're used to be anxiety, certainty where they're used to be fear, clarity where they're used to be confusion. Yes, it hurts at first, because your ego wants everything to work. But the moment you realize that anything demanding you to shrink yourself was never meant for you, that's when transformation begins. Machiavelli never wrote about love, but if he had, he would have written this. The greatest conquest is never losing yourself in pursuit of another. So stop asking, how do I impress her? Ask instead, am I living as a man who chooses himself every single day? Because when the answer becomes yes, you no longer need to prove anything. She feels it before you speak. Most men will reach this point and still change nothing. They'll keep chasing, keep competing, keep trying to win attention from a woman who'll forget them by next week. But you're here for a reason, because something in you already knows. Desire isn't begged for, it's created. Respect isn't demanded, it's projected. And a woman never chooses the one who tries the hardest. She chooses the man who stands by his value first. You don't need to play the same game anymore. Because when you become a living emotional experience, authentic, grounded, unshakable, you become impossible to replace. It no longer matters how many messages she receives, how many men chase, how much attention she attracts. You're not competing. You're leaving an imprint. And if until now you believed you weren't enough, that you had to change, to perform, to become someone else, remember this truth. You don't need to be the best man in the world. You only need to be the kind of man who will never betray his own value for anyone. That's the man who remains. So if you're part of the 10% who will truly embody this Machiavellian mindset, this emotional authority, this relentless self-respect, then do the things right now. First, like this video, not for support, as a statement. I am part of that 10%. Second, subscribe, because what comes next will go deeper, sharper, more brutal. If this one shook you, the next one will transform you. And remember this final truth. She never chooses the man who worships her the most. She chooses the man who worships himself first. That's not arrogance. That's power. Drop your final affirmation. I am irreplaceable.